welcome to the Mime Radio Show podcast. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin. We'd also like to introduce the man in the darkness around our faces, our producer, our man who's a wizard with all the buttons and lights and screens that makes this all possible, Michael Diaz. So Mike, wherever you are in the darkness, we salute you and we'll toast you with a little mime wine. Okay. So. Yeah.
Best.
To Michael Diaz.
So who else is here today?
The other person lurking, or should I say glowing and illuminating behind the dark curtain is Joan Merwyn, who I'm going to talk to you about, introduce you a little bit about her before we invite her in. Joan Merwyn is an award-winning performing artist, educator, choreographer, and stage director. Her approach is a unique integration of contemporary mime, physical acting, and experimental theater. She has appeared from San Francisco to Montreal, from Eastern to Western Europe, from site-specific locations to colleges, international performance festivals, and opera houses. Reflecting over 40 years' experience, Joan has trained and worked internationally with some of the greatest influence in contemporary physical theater. As a choreographer, director, her work has been seen on international television, including The Tonight Show and great performances. Joan has implemented physical theater as a healing force in the extended New York City community since 1983. Her workshops, performances, and residencies include populations who have a lot to say, but seldom have the opportunity to express themselves creatively. These include people in homeless shelters, mentally challenged adults, developmentally and cognitively challenged people of all ages. She holds an Eleanor Roosevelt Community Service Award for her work with homeless youth. She currently is an arts and education coach offering professional development training for New York City school teachers. Joan believes that the arts must be accessible to all people in order to evolve a rich, multicultural society. Arts and education and community-based production work is an important foundation of her work. So we're really excited to welcome in Joan Merwyn.
Hello, Joan.
There she is.
Hello.
Welcome to the Mime Radio Show podcast. This is really delightful. I have never met you in person, although we've become great friends Zooming as a Women in Mime group. And so I'm really glad that you're here with us on the show to talk about your whole career and all of the things that you've experienced.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited too, because I've known Joan since the early 70s and have witnessed her such eclectic work. And it's also very important that obviously she's a woman, and her influence and her place in the world of mime and physical theater is really important to its history and to its future.
So, Joan, we always start by asking our artists, how do they prepare for a performance? So there's the preparation that you do in writing and creating your piece, but there's also the preparation that right before a performance, how do you warm up? How do you get focused? And specifically, what do you think right before you go on stage?
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me. For myself, I have a little scratchy, hoarse voice sometimes because one of my vocal cords is impaired. So if I go in and out a little bit, that's why. That's a great question, because I think it really, for me, depends on what show I'm doing or what is the type of venue that I'm working in. I like to always warm up physically very intensely before my work on stage. And the whole point is to not be thinking by the time I'm ready to go on. The whole point is to kind of just clear, get my body ready, go over any little things I need to remember, make sure my props are all preset properly. That's a huge thing if you're changing costume, and, just having everything where it needs to be so I can just flow through the performance and getting my mind clear, just totally, ideally blank before I go on, and not getting too obsessed about who's out there or anything like that. I get more nervous when it's people I know out there.
Do you peek through the curtain?
Sometimes. Depends. Again, it depends on, if I'm super nervous, no. If I'm in a room full of screaming kids, I may need to just take a peek underneath or something just to see if they're ready. But I don't really like to look at the audience too much beforehand.
Do you like to be nervous before a show, or do you like to be calm?
Well, I think there's a lot of adrenaline that's pumped up, and through the being a little bit nervous. But I like to be in control of myself, because if I'm overly nervous, I'm gonna forget something. I'm gonna blank out. So, I try to just ride it. You have to ride it.
So talk just briefly, we can get more into the different influences that you may have encountered over your career, but what in this warm up, what are some of the elements? What's part of the menu of getting your body and your mind ready to perform? Because you said you used the word intense, and I would connect that to a lot of your work. It's very intense and very immersed in its purpose. So what are some of those things you use to get yourself going?
Well, the main thing is I don't want to pull any muscles on stage, which I have done, or sprain an ankle. So I do a physical warm up, which involves all kinds of stretching and yoga and moving around in different ways. Maybe I'll review a little bit of something I'm going to be doing to get my body in the mood of, feeling weight, feeling heavy, feeling light, whatever it is, trying to get my muscles warmed up. Muscular respiration, they call it, just try to get everything breathing. And of course, working with the breath, sometimes working with the voice also is a great calming effect. So it's a variety of things. It depends how much time I have. Sometimes you're not allotted very much time, and all you can do is set up and go.
Yeah. I'm curious. So you're very tall, and
Yes.
your energy is very strong. I'm just curious if there's anybody like a stagehand or someone that's around you. I don't want to use the word intimidating, but I'm sure you hold your space. I'm wondering how others respond to you, like in terms of just your physical presence, like, have you ever thought about that?
No, but it depends. Like sometimes I work with a musician on the stage with me, and we come in together, and the musician is warming up and interacting with me on the stage during the show. So before the show, the musician will interact. But usually I have to do everything, unless it's a big show in a big theater where you have a tech team and all that. But no, I don't find people on the crew to be intimidated. I try to be kind and respectful.
Yeah, great.
Tell us a little bit
I'm going to
about.
ask you the question about.
Okay, go ahead.
So you step into the light, let's say, in front of the eyes of the public. Do you have any kind of abstract feeling of who those people are? It might depend on their age group, of course, or their experience or the culture, but what does the audience in general represent to you? Not like who they are literally, but what is that dynamic between the performer and this audience, and who are they to you?
Right. Well, they're all different types of audiences that I work with. So I try to establish a relationship with the audience and feel the energy of the audience. Every audience is different. You could go to 6 school performances and each audience would be different, or you could be in a theater, at a festival or something, and each audience is different. So a lot of it is waiting, learning to wait, trust to calm down and wait and feel that connection. Where's the appropriate way to make that connection? Do I need to hold this pause a little longer? Do I need to jazz things up a little more rhythmically so that I can connect with them if I feel like I'm losing them? So it's very individual.
Is it different in an ensemble as opposed to being a soloist? Is there a different?
Totally different.
How would you describe that as part of an ensemble as versus just yourself on stage or with a partner?
That's a great question. First of all, doing my own work, if it's solo work, then I don't have to worry about anybody else on the stage to keep up with or be together with. It's really my own rhythm and my own pace that I judge. When I'm working with ensemble groups, usually I'm there to serve a larger image. So every individual mime or actor or physical actor is there to serve something that is larger than us individually. Mm-hmm. We're serving an image. Now, I'm still doing that when I'm working solo. I'm serving a larger image of what I'm trying to portray. But when you're working with a bunch of people and you have to be in sync with them, or you have to be counter to them, the timing is, you have to be completely eyes in the front and the back of your head, mm-hmm. and have the timing really perfect, like a fine Swiss watch. You got to be ready to respond to each other. And so it depends if it's choreographed work, and most of like what I did with the Adapters Movement Theater was choreographed work. Even if we were all moving individually, doing different things, we all had a certain beginning, middle, and end that we had to hit at the same time, things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had a lot of stuff in unison as well.
It's like being part of a band, I think, or a musical group in a way, right? Following
very much like that, and having that awareness.
Yeah,
is different.
So Joan, take us back to like what inspired you to take this pathway into physical theater and mime and the study of movement. Where did you start, and who are your influences?
Wow. That's a big question. Okay. So first of all, I kind of stumbled into it. I had been to India when I was 19 or 20 years old, and I studied Indian dance. And that was the first real movement that I had been doing, was Indian dance.
Well, why were you attracted to Indian dance? What attracted you?
It was available there, and I don't know. I just kind of was drawn to it. There's different types there, and the type of dance that I studied for a short period of time was from Manipur, which is a section of India that is close to Thailand. So it has very different than Bharatanatyam and Kathak and the other more structural dances, but they all are very expressive. So I had that kind of underneath me. And then I found myself when I was almost 21 years old in Berkeley, California, and I was walking down the street, and I saw this poster on the street. I saw several of them, and it was a circle. There was a Japanese brushstroke circle with lines going through it, and as the cardinal directions. And it was 5-week intensive with Leonard Pitt, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Wow.
Mime. And I thought, mime. I don't know. It just hit me. It was like I saw Marcel Marceau when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I ended up doing that and sticking with it.
What kind of class was that? What kind of technique was Leonard Pitt sharing?
Leonard had just come back from working with Decroux. He was one of Decroux's proteges. So it was very corporeal mime, very abstract, very structured, extremely articulated, 3-dimensional sculptural movement in space, with a lot of counterweights and walks and isolations and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And he would, of course, improvise as well. So 5 hours a day of this kind of cracked my body open. He did a very vigorous warm-up as well.
Yeah, just a side thing to this. Like, I think today, this idea of doing it 5 days a week for multi-hours is rarer than it was in those times. Mm-hmm. And in my experience in the modern age, or now, that younger people aren't used to that kind of immersion. But that was the way it was, that you would, you were like a monk,
in
a experience that was totally immersive, right, Joan?
Yeah. Right. And that was pretty much with everything I did, and then you also go to the Y, or so you find a studio with your friends who are also in class with you, and you practice some more after that or before that. So it would be like, and then you work around it. You find little odd jobs and work around it. Like, so I ended up studying with a lot of different people. I would find the teachers that I wanted to work with, and I would move to that location and get a job there. Usually by the time I left Berkeley, I was teaching a lot. I was teaching in Berkeley too.
I think it's so funny, Joan, because every time I've talked to you, when we've talked about like this famous teacher or this performing artist or this festival, and every time Joan says, oh yeah, I was there. Oh yeah, I studied with him. Oh yeah, I worked with that person. It's like,
who, after you left Berkeley, the Bay Area, who were some of the other groups that you
while
influenced by or worked professionally with? What were some of those other groups?
Well, first of all, while I was still in the Bay Area, I worked with you, James.
True.
We got the more object illusion, pantomime, full body imagination. You really helped me with my imagination. You're such an incredible teacher. And some of the stuff you were teaching back then still sticks with me, and I'll still use it with my.
Those were also the days of the clown. I know both of us were at the International Festival in 1974, and our eyes were opened by the European clown theater, like from Czech Republic, and Dimitri from Switzerland, Turba from Czech Republic, and so the idea of the theater clown became very close to us and very powerful influence for all of us at that time.
The existential stage clown. Yeah, Eastern Europeans were really experts at it.
Yeah.
And
you also studied with Tomaszewski, right? Is that right?
A little bit. I was in Poland 3 times, but let me just go back a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
I was in the Bay Area. I also studied from people like R.D. Lang and Sandra Archer, who started the San Francisco Mime Troupe, and they were teaching political theater and Brechtian work. And so I got that. And then I was also collaborating on a lot of different projects, performance projects with different groups and companies. I worked with C.C. McCarthy. We were Fools Unlimited, which was mime clown theater. We toured up and down the West Coast. The women's movement was very supportive of us, and we did very well. And then I collaborated on, new vaudeville was happening then too, like the whole new vaudeville movement. Like we were doing new vaudeville, James, before the term new vaudeville
exactly
existed.
Yeah.
Really. So all of that stuff kind of feeding into it.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that in these early years, like let's say mid 70s, even the time, Karen, when you were in school at North Carolina School of the Arts in the late 70s, that period of time, especially in the early 70s, was a chrysalis. It was, the clown art, the mime art really wasn't more in the forefront yet. In the 80s, it kind of grew up a little bit. In the 90s, it had a period of where it dived somewhat. But those early 70s, because of they had just, we had just had the Vietnam War, and civil rights and assassinations and drugs, everything was colliding at the same time. So the pot was so rich and so diverse for physical theater artists. So I feel lucky with having been there with Joan at that time to spur us forward. And we were there at the beginning of all this, Yeah.
And then people would come who had trained with DeCreux, and people would come who had trained with Lecoq. These were the 2 big schools in Paris that were kind of very different. So groups like Momenchance and Demetria type work and clown type work came out of Lecoq School. And the more abstract mime came out of DeCreux School. And then there were people in the middle who did a little bit of everything. And, it can sound a little dilettantish, but I really just tried to get as much as I could from as many people as I could.
Yeah,
what are some of the other group? Like I know you mentioned the Adapters, and then there was the corporeal group, the Lebhardt group, right? Didn't you work with, or in French Canada, you worked with that group too, right?
Yeah. Well, I went up. I studied with mime with Thomas Lebhardt when he was at Grand Rapids, Michigan. I went out there for a couple of years. I was in his company. He was teaching some of the classical DeCreux pieces as well as other abstract pieces that the company did. So I got to work with him for a couple of years, and that was back to kind of pure scaled down DeCreux work, which I never think I did that well personally. But anyway, I kept getting training in it. And after that, I went to Montreal.
You're a little too crazy for that stuff, meaning that your imagination is very far reaching. And I think
Yes.
you needed another outlet. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, DeCreux used to say, evidently, I wasn't there directly, but I studied with a number of his proteges also in Canada. He used to say it takes at least 10 years to become a mime of training, which with Corporal Mime, I would definitely say, yes, that's true. So I worked with Jean Ancelin and Denise Boulanger in Montreal. I studied advanced techniques with them after leaving Tom's company. And also George Molnar, who was another DeCreux protege, was up there in Montreal. So while I was there, I was taking classes with them and opened in my own studio and was teaching mime for dancers.
Oh, and how did that go? What was it? How is it trying to teach dancers to be use their mime technique?
It's very different because actually, some people would prefer that they didn't have any training at all. Like I did work in, before I went to Montreal and Grand Rapids, I was in Europe for a couple of years. And I trained a little bit with Grotowski's group. And I have to say the Grotowski people, that they're huge influences on me. And I got to go to Poland 3 times and perform there. And also would train with Grotowski, laboratory theater. And that's another way of just cracking me open. And it's not about technique, although it is. It's all hidden, though. They work with isolation, but it's very exploratory. Everything is searching, not clinging on to anything, not getting stuck anywhere. And they prefer to work with people who are not trained, with actors who are not trained, because they need to take off all their technique. They need to take it off. They try to strip you down.
You worked with a group in Germany for a while too, didn't you not?
2 years with Bremen Bilder Theater, yes.
Yeah.
Which was Sally Gores, who was an Australian mime who's trained with DeCreux. I met her at Grotowski's, and she told me about it. She was working with them, and they were all from different countries in Germany, and the German government gave them a huge building, which was the size of a square block. It used to be a bread factory, and that was our performance and workshop space. And we did all these community-based theatrical experiments there. In the street and theaters. We toured around Europe. We did a lot of crazy stuff there. There was a guy there from Bread and Puppet who was building giant puppets, Murray Levy. He's no longer with us, but he was a genius with this stuff. And there was a dancer who studied with Mary Wigman, Althea Pouget. She just left the planet. She was in her late 90s and she just passed.
Wow.
She was dancing right up until the end.
Now, here's a question. Now, all this wonderful experience and mind-opening, body-opening experiences, and you spent a lot of time in Europe. Why did you not move there and stay there permanently? What drew you back to the USA? And what to talk about that? Because I know in my own life, they were trying to get me to move to Europe at one point, because you'll grow and it's richer, and there's a lot of truth in the richness and the experience there. But what brought you back to the States to spend most of your life here,
Well, I actually didn't want to go back, but my mother got sick with cancer. And one of my colleagues said, if you want to see your mother, you better get back there. So I did. I came back, and it was hard to leave, but when I came back, I was glad I came back. And I really wanted to explore more the States. Like I'd been on the West Coast and the East Coast, but I hadn't really explored the country, And so I came back, and I spent a year and a half with her before she passed. And while I was here in Rhode Island, which is my home state, I opened up a studio for mime and experimental theater during that period of time and was teaching and performing. So I kind of brought a lot of all that experience from Europe with me, and it was percolating and, digesting, and I was coming up with new material. Some of it was okay. Some of it was not so great. Doesn't matter. I think so much of the process is not being afraid to make a fool of ourselves. And I know for myself, it can be embarrassing. It can be humiliating, but I really have to keep trying to do things that are difficult for me.
How would you define what you do? How would you could, when someone asks you in a restaurant or on the airplane, like, what do you do? Like, and then they get you talking, how do you explain, how would you explain what you do? It's difficult, I'm sure, but.
It is. I mean, I know that you've asked the question about mime, and do you use the word mime?
Mm-hmm.
And it depends who I'm talking to. Like I say physical theater. I say mime and physical theater, and people say, what's that? And I say, well, I'm an actor who acts with the whole body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I consider myself an actor first and foremost, and the means of expression is the body, physical.
Yeah. Sometimes in those encounters, we're actually sort of educating people about what we do, and so just saying I'm a mime, you almost need to define it more, because you're opening their minds to what the possibilities of the art form is.
Right, and as we all know, mimes have been ridiculed a lot, and people think immediately of the white face kind of clowny Bip type character, which is fine, but that's not what I do. So then I have to explain that.
How do you explain that? That's my question, I think, is how.
I do physical acting. I say
physical acting, yeah.
Physical acting. I'm a physical theater performer, and and I work with different elements, music, text, sometimes overlapping, on the audio, sound effects.
You're very concerned with social forces and, culture and social justice. I know that's part of your work. So that's something you would probably, talk about that a moment. Like where does that come from? Like where is this in you that wants you to address those kinds of themes?
Well, I think you said it earlier, like we grew up in that era where we were all out there in the streets for civil rights and, against the Vietnam War. And it's always been part of I've been an activist in that way, being exposed to companies like the San Francisco Mime Troupe, which was political theater, agitational propaganda theater, training with some of those people, getting exposure to, I was very naive back then, but I was around a lot of really smart people and I learned a lot. So again, I'm the eternal student, and I consider myself a student all the time. And the more I can learn from the people around me, it's kind of like, well, if you look at what's around you, what's going on, how can you not be concerned?
Yeah. And also in your art form, because you're able to use abstract kind of expression and whole physicality, sometimes when there's like some sort of a political message in a theater piece, it can become very pedantic. But if you're using movement and abstract expression, it could sort of go beyond a preachiness about a particular issue.
Right, and that can be that I try to actually blend very personal material with socially relevant material.
So tell us a little bit about your process. Like if you have an idea or a specific concept that you want to explore, how do you start?
It depends. Sometimes it's a piece of music or a text. Sometimes it's a costume or a prop. And I'll start playing with it. Sometimes it'll be an idea that I get. It's really not the same. The creative process is when I get an idea that I want to do something, it's a gift. I feel like it's a gift that comes through, and then I have to follow it. And very often it's just off of a piece of costume or something. But there's other elements that are going on in my life or that are going on around me that I may start to incorporate into it if I can trust my process.
Where does self-discipline play a part in this? In other words, are you going by instinct and by reflections that hit you, or is there a methodology, like a more disciplined, granted, we've talked about spending 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, training. So obviously you have that stamina and concentration in you. But is there in your process, are you like I know with CC McCarthy, I'm sure you guys had moments of flights of fancy where you would just be playing almost to
Yes.
create these ideas, right? What can you talk about your process in that way? Like, where does discipline play a part as well as just a sense of play and observation? You know what I mean?
It's easier to have that play when you have a partner or other people you're playing off of.
Mhm.
When I was doing solo work, I would set up a video camera or my phone now on a tripod, and then I could direct myself that way. But it's great, one thing is definitely just renting or putting aside studio space.
Are you good at that? Are you good at disciplining yourself? I remember one time I moved to New York City for a year and I rented this space downtown and I said, I'm going to go there every day and I'm going to create new work. This is like in the early 80s. And I went there a few times and then I was taking a long time on the subway and wow, I think I'll go play basketball in the Y, I could never discipline myself to like, and yet at that time I was doing a lot of performances and I was very creative, yet my self-discipline was all over the place. I don't know.
It's very hard. It's always been a struggle for me. And if I rent a studio by the hour, then I want to use that time. And sometimes I would go there and I would find myself on the floor in tears, but I would still go. Or sometimes I wouldn't get that much done, but I was there in the space and things were percolating.
Yeah. So those moments when you're just in the space, those are still valuable. Sometimes you have to get out of your home space and go someplace else. I know that this same concept that we're talking about has been like my theme word for the year is creativity and discipline, because those you have to have both.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm putting aside the time and honoring and respecting that time for the work and not beating ourselves up if a huge amount doesn't get accomplished. It's patience, perseverance, and it's practice. So when in doubt, just, practice some technique.
Yeah, you're right. What do you have any thoughts on, commercialism versus coming from the heart? Like all artists, especially in physical theater, struggle with that dilemma, whether to sell out in a way or to be the subversive artist or the enlightened artist. And there's an interplay, especially when you're young, it can be a hard choice, like what to do. So do you have any thoughts on that? Like, how does one choose their path in terms of that environment they want to work in?
I think one has to do what one feels is best for them. Luckily, I haven't really had to face that. I mean, nobody's offered me anything where I would have to sacrifice my integrity to do it. But it's very hard to make a living doing sort of fringy, abstract, small theater work. One needs to develop a sideline. If you want to be really true to your own process, have another way to make a living and don't try to expect to make a living. I mean, teaching has always been the way I've been able to make a living, which is such a gift. Teaching.
Yeah, but I think maybe we'll talk about that more at length in a few minutes. But to me, I always felt the artist, part of their responsibility was to teach. I think you probably feel that way. I know you have a strong feeling about, communicating what to others, to inspire them.
But also this whole aspect of what you're saying is like separating the way you make money from the way you make art, that then your art has this special place. But I'm also really curious, like, what makes us keep pursuing it? If it's not something that people are rewarding us for, what is it that motivates us to keep making art?
Right. We have to fall in love with it. It's a love affair.
Yeah. Also it's a good thing that, like if one hasn't done a lot of commercial art, maybe that's a good thing. That means that people don't ask you because they know that you have this other vision that's so very strong and people don't want to they don't want to bother you in a sense, and there's that aspect of it too. If you don't do a lot of commercial work, or maybe that's the way the world is, and we're not going to approach you because we know that you're not that kind of person, so.
For my own performance work, that's true. But like I've been hired to choreograph like a cappella groups, like things like that, like Rockapella. I don't know if you've heard of them. They were on television a lot, and I choreographed, but I had them doing all this abstract movement and fun stuff while they were singing a cappella. It was wild stuff. They eventually started dropping the choreography because they wanted to be more hip and cool. But they still do some, we're doing some of it, 20 years later. So I would be willing, or like I did a little bit of work with, an opera company, helping to choreograph and direct. So I think it depends on the gig. If you're hired as a choreographer, I don't see myself as somebody who could choreograph a musical, a Broadway musical, like, no.
Yeah. What, we're talking a little bit about time passing. So how does one adjust for time physically as well as mentally? We're all getting older. How does one adjust, to that as an artist, and especially in physical theater where the, bodies change and so forth?
Yeah, we have to honor our bodies no matter what phase of our lives we're in. And, I've taken breaks. I take breaks from the work, to do other things that interest me. I adopted two kids when I was like 60, as two of my husband's grandchildren, and I had to put some time aside to raise them. And I got involved with the Native Americans here in New England. I'm very involved with them. My husband's Native American, and we were singing on drum groups, and I learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. I have a lot of other interests. I have friends in the therapeutic community. I'm very interested in, dealing with people who've undergone trauma through the arts and helping them through their trauma through the arts practices. So there's a lot of different ways I've kind of gone off and then come back to my work, and gone off and come back to my work. Especially the last 10 years. But I think slowing down, I have slowed down, but I actually, about a year ago, I started working out regularly with some online classes, and it's keeping me in shape. So I feel like I'm ready. If some brilliant idea dawns upon me and maybe I can do something again, create a new show, maybe something that's based on my life at this time, or what's going on in this crazy world at this time. But it's really not that important to me to perform anymore. I feel like I've done it so much.
Although it's also true that I know when we have our Women in Mime group that gets together on Zoom, we all get pretty jazzed about the idea of performing and interacting, because all four of us are so different in our styles that we really, I get so inspired watching you, because whatever the prompt is, your version of it is like, well, I would not think of it that way, so it that ongoing sort of desire to perform or explore or create is, I think that's something we're born with, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah, I feel like I had to cultivate that in myself, and James helped me a lot with that. And he was very creative in his teaching and encouraged for creative imagination, which came very naturally, I think, to James. But to me, I was more held. I was more self-judgy and all that stuff. So I've had to work through a lot of stuff to get to a place where I feel free enough to play. And I think that's part of the actor's process as well. Any actor, who goes through any kind of training, besides just learning lines and standing around on stage, they're going to go through a process where they kind of have to break themselves open a little bit and deal with their feelings, deal with their issues that come up. So, yeah.
Another really strong part of your life is working working with kids and training them and sharing the arts with them, but also you're very strong in training teachers to use the arts creatively and also like with curriculum integration of the arts in the schools. Can you tell us a little bit about what's your process there?
Right. Well, I joined a group. I'm working with some people. We got some federal funding in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And for the past 10 or 15 years, we've been developing this program called Everyday Arts for Special Education, or EASE, EASE. And now it's branching out into general education as well. But basically, it was federally funded by the Department of Education, the U.S. Federal Department of Education, to develop these methodology that we've come up with to train teachers. So it's, a lot of the schools get their budgets cut. And when their budgets get cut, the arts programs are the first things to go. So the kids are sitting around, forced to sit in chairs. Half of them don't even have gym. And they have no outlet, right? And it's driving the kids nuts. And the teachers. So we want to give the teachers tools that they can work with that are arts-based tools that are simple enough, very, very simple, but effective, that they can do them themselves. They don't need an artist to come in and do it for them and be the great, wonderful artist, because I've done a lot of those kind of residencies too, where you go in, you charm everybody, you do a show with the students, and then you leave. And the teachers are left going back to the same old thing they were doing. So now it's all about, we're trying to train teachers so that they can use little tidbits of things throughout the day to help bring their kids up. And the kids, let me tell you right now, the kids in most school systems in the country are so far behind, but they're all in the same place. So behind what? But they're not up to their academic grade level because of COVID and having been home. And a lot of them are traumatized as well. And the first thing we like to hit is the social emotional development of the child. And of this class. So we try to get them engaging with each other and in appropriate ways, because there's a lot of behaviors and acting out behaviors and challenges that teachers are facing in the classroom with their students. So we give them a lot of tools for that.
Are you using some of the techniques and processes you've always worked with, or is there something different now? I mean, in some ways, people always ask me, what would I do with kids, or what do I do with this group and this? And I always say, well, it all comes from the same pot in my mind. You just kind of work from the circumstances in the moment, but the basis of what you're doing is always the same. Would you feel that way, or do you have a different?
When I'm doing solo work in a regular residency in a school, I can pretty much do whatever I want, and I can gear it in any direction I want. Very often it depends what the school wants, what the teachers want. But with this particular program, we integrate music, theater, which includes mime, visual arts, and dance.
But my question is, given your, we'll call it pedagogy, your way of doing things, do you find that what you've always done will work if you kind of qualify it to the circumstance, or do you have to bring in new things that you've never worked with before? You understand what I'm saying?
Bring in new things, because I was trial and error for years, like working with special populations, like working with children or adults even on the autism spectrum, for example, who can't think abstractly. They're very smart, but they can't necessarily communicate, and they can't necessarily think abstractly. So let's pretend is out the window with that group. But with an emotionally challenged class with kids who have emotional disorders or challenges, then that kind of imagination work works really well with them. So it's different things. And I've learned a lot from working with different art therapists and things like that. It's quite different than what I do like with my performance work. Unless I'm doing a residency in the school to get the kids to perform, and then it's different. I'm structuring like 5 classes of 30 kids how to perform on stage.
It sounds to me like knowing knowing you that you're quite a channel for it. You take your environment all through all these years or all these experiences, and you're really good at channeling all the ingredients and all the energy through yourself into these populations. I mean, I think this idea that you said earlier that I'm always a student, that's something everybody could learn from, because you literally are taking all this information and assimilating it and then letting it come out in different circumstances. That's very beautiful. So.
And you don't have like some sort of a degree in education or anything. This is all stuff that you have accumulated through your life that, like James says, you're sort of channeling this out. It's an amazing part about being an artist that also teaches. The whole academic side of it is not necessary. It's this experience. It's your experience that's valuable.
Yeah, now it's becoming more necessary to get an academic degree just to do like the in-school teaching and stuff like that. They have a whole program at NYU for how to become a teaching artist now.
But what's interesting is that my theory, I've been saying this a lot recently, is that I feel that the academic world will not do service to be learning how to be an artist in the future, like drama departments and the FaceTime. There's less FaceTime, there's more politics, there's less funding. Nobody goes in 5 days a week working for 5 hours with one particular discipline. It's very diluted. And I'm feeling in the future that for a young artist to develop, they're going to have to go to private teachers and studios, that have actually harkened back to the way things have always been,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very hard these days to make ends meet and to train the way you want to train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a segue for a minute. So do you have any disaster stories from all these adventures you've had in different parts of the world? Any touring? Tell us a good disaster story.
We went to, when I was in Tom Lebhart's company, a corporeal mime theater, we came to do, they were having a mime festival or something at Dance Theater Workshop, DTW.
In New York, right?
In Manhattan.
That's a big deal too, yeah.
Big deal. So we're loading in and I trip on the stairs and really badly sprained my ankle to the point where I couldn't walk, I couldn't perform. Right at the last minute, I couldn't do anything. That happened to me once with the adapters when we were running off stage to take our curtain call and running, there's 14 of us or something on stage, running off and on. And there was a mat, like a gymnastics mat in the backstage that had an edge on it about this thick. And my ankle went over it.
Oh gosh.
And I sprained my ankle on tour again. And I've hurt my back a few times. I've had a few boo-boos.
So the one with the Dance Theater Workshop performance, were you able to go on, or did you somehow, or you just couldn't work?
Okay.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rolling up like that. I was crawling on my hands and knees.
Wow.
Oh dear.
I fell off a stage once in the darkness. The guy turned the lights out, some college I was performing at, and I walked right off the stage. Luckily, I didn't hurt myself, but
I did that too. I rolled right off the edge, and I was like, I had no idea where I was.
I had another experience where the lighting person went to the student union and got drunk at intermission, and he came back drunk. He couldn't continue.
So what did you do? Just stop the show?
I did that. Somebody filled in, and I had to kind of coach people in 2 minutes before we started the second part of the performance, but crazy times.
And then you have costume snafus where you're trying to change in 10 seconds.
Right.
And there's this audio going on in the front and the thing isn't working, and there's always something like that.
Yeah, tell us about some of the kind of infamous or complicated props you've maybe had to work with. I've seen some photos of you where there's some really interesting costumes and other things that are in with you. There's the one that sticks out that was particularly challenging to work in, or particularly interesting and exciting to work with.
Well, with Margolis Brown adapters, we did the Industrial Mermaid. Oh, this is a great story. because it includes this a problem that happened, a disaster kind of problem. So, there's this huge heating duct, heating duct tubing, which is very heavy because it's been wrapped in duct tape on top. So it's very heavy. So I'm manipulating that and I'm inside of that. I'm the industrial mermaid. So they were commissioned to do a piece down in Coney Island. You can see pictures on their website.
We'll make sure we have that. I know that photo you're talking. We're gonna put that on the website. Yeah, right.
There's so they drag me out of the water. I'm down under, they put seaweed on top of me. I had painted my body green and I had this little halter top, okay? Little piece of cloth tied around here. And they put me up on this pedestal and they carry me and I'm inside this tubing, screaming at the top of my head. It was just like they're all covering. And there's an audience on bleachers up on the sand. And first of all, it was a very windy day. So the tent that I was changing in blew away, the entire tent. Next thing you know, after I'm done performing, I realized my top had come all the way down.
During the show?
During the show. And nobody said anything.
They probably thought it was part of the performance, right?
They might have painted it green. It was green also. But and I had no idea until after the show. But they didn't let me hear the end of it, Carrie and Tony.
That's funny. Wow.
So, Joan, I know that we have talked about this quite a bit with our Women in Mime group, what the role of women in the arts is. And mime is a particularly male-dominated art form. What has been your experience as a woman throughout your career? It's okay, James. We're not putting you down, James. It's just
I'm gonna go drink.
No, you need to hear this, James.
Okay, I'm all ears. Yeah.
So very often we encounter the image of a mime is a male mime. The stereotypes, the roles that mime uses a lot of iconic characters, and often they're male. So your experience as a woman.
Well, in all the classes I've taken, and I'm still taking classes, I'll take classes probably till I die. There's always more women than men in the classroom.
That's true. That's
There's
true.
Very few men, and it's the same with dance. Yet those that become recognized or that pursue it, I don't know whether it's a combination of the two things. How many women actually pursue it as an art form?
Maybe women are smarter; they just use it as a springboard to other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of women. There's definitely plenty of women. The mimes out there, the most influential women for me have been Denise Boulanger and Carrie Margolis as teachers. Fantastic and very accomplished, performers and teachers, and very inspiring. And Carrie, I worked with her company for 10 years. She's been incredibly supportive of my work. She's given me permission to use certain things on my own that we were doing there. So, I have the utmost respect for the women I've worked with. But the majority of teachers seem to be male that I've been around. But I didn't really bother me too much. I didn't really think about it too much. Like I just try to do with my work, some of the material that I like to reflect has a feminine or a female. You have to be careful nowadays because people don't want to be gender identified that way necessarily. It's not just male, female. And if anything is androgynous, it's the mime. I mean, mimes are, I play the role of both male and female in some of my work. I trained from a female to a male. I feel like I have both in me.
Right. And it's an art form that's about transformation, transforming yourself into, a plant or an animal or a whatever needs to be done, a piece of furniture.
Yeah,
no, that's true. I felt in my life that mime and physical theater cuts across cultural barriers, or ethnic barriers. Like a lot of people of color have enjoyed working in those classes of physical theater because it is more neutral. It's about life and humans themselves and nature itself.
Universal.
Yeah, and that's the key there. So how would you? I'm curious. So going a little further with the women in mime. Let's call it. Let's say other than the male, the white male, or the male in general. What advice would you give to one of the other forces of the world to survive in this historically male world? I mean, it's a reflection of life itself, of the world itself in some ways, right? I mean,
yeah,
we're getting into
your survival advice for young artists.
Yeah.
I would say, like work with your colleague, like find your colleagues. Like what's helped me is like if I'm taking a class, say a mime class, find a couple of people to practice with that become your colleagues. And it's almost like what we're doing now, Karen, with Sharon and Kat and Karen Montanero, where we found each other. We're women and we found each other and now we're exploring together. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be only women, but I think that for any artist in a process, it's very helpful to have people to bounce things off of and to encourage us. Like I know I wouldn't be doing those improvs if it wasn't for this little group we were doing. I wouldn't be exploring in this particular way if they weren't putting out certain little propositions to explore. So it's making me grow and expand. So I think finding a livelihood, a sideline is important so that you're not completely putting all your eggs in one basket. Having something to make a living. It's very hard nowadays to make a living.
But also that other living can also inform your art, or should. It will inform your art, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, find something you love, like pursue your dreams,
But it also comes back, this question about how to survive. It comes back to having been a young person in those 60s and 70s. Those were incredibly charged times that the USA has really not seen quite in the same way. I feel lucky as an art. I mean, I'm sure all that has informed me as an artist, but it seems like men and women and whatever pronoun one wants to use, that it's, I feel lucky that I was in that time period, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You were at Woodstock, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
I remember that you were at the original Woodstock. Yeah, I remember you told me that.
Yeah, but I was there. I was a teenager.
Yeah. Wow.
Speaking of Woodstock, and psychedelic.
What's that? Say it again. I was laughing. I didn't.
There's a whole resurgence in psychedelic therapy now. They're calling, where there's funding available and projects going on where people are using, doing research with psychedelics, which was how they were originally discovered. To help people with PTSD, soldiers with PTSD, people who have addiction issues. There's just been all this really rich. I have a lot of friends in New York who are therapists who are working with this. And it's just like, they made something illegal that was a wonderful tool that could be helping so many people without them having to take medication for the rest of their lives. So just saying, like, what goes around comes around, like,
Yeah, there's a,
we also have to look at the fact that right now the world is in a terrible situation in so many different categories, and the young people that are growing up now. I mean, we all grew up in that time period, but the people that are growing up now, they're facing a whole nother kind of a situation. And the idea that somehow becoming active in the arts could help and inspire and in a therapeutic way, in a growing way. It's
so elusive though. Like when we were young, we could live in a place for $50 a month. That can't happen now. That will not happen now. So what would be your advice, just in general for a young artist, Joan? How would one search out their calling in today's world? What are some things they could do you think?
Well, it depends what they want to do, but
Yeah.
they need to find programs that they want to participate in, like training programs.
But
And
this
then-
colleague thing you were talking about, I think would be important, finding
Yeah.
the tribe, your own tribe, so to speak.
yeah, find the others.
Yeah.
Find the ones that want to explore.
What about legacy? Do you have any feeling about your personal legacy, or is that important or not important, or so forth? What's your feeling on that? Like, should an artist be remembered forever, or is the work itself transcending somehow without a title or without a name? You know what I'm saying?
I'm not sure how I feel about it, really.
Yeah, well, that's good. How do you feel? What talk about that? How come you're not sure how you feel about
I
it?
haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, about my
Yeah.
legacy. I would like to have some of my work recorded for posterity, I suppose, but like fame and that kind of recognition isn't that important to me. But I think being able to pass on important teachings that might help people, like you
Yeah.
were saying, Karen,
Mhm.
is important to me.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
my
we've all of us were mentored by others, when we were young, and that I think that's part of the mission of being an artist, is to pass down the information to others.
So Joan, one last question that we always like to ask: what do you want to be when you grow up?
Ooh, what do I want to be when I grow up? I don't know. I think I have pretty much fulfilled most of my dreams.
Oh, wonderful.
I've been a gypsy traveler, mime performer. I've met the man of my dreams, who I married 10 years ago. I've had a lot of love in my life. I've had some dear friends in my life. I just feel like blessed that I've found something that I love to do, and I'm able to continue to do it.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that to me is the ultimate. I never have felt trapped in a job I didn't like.
Mhm.
Example.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks, Joan, for being with us for this hour or so.
What
Yeah.
a wonderful conversation. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you so
Joan.
much for having me.
You're welcome. Mime Radio Show, everyone. Stay
With
tuned
the-
for another exciting guest sometime in the future. Thanks again, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Please join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Stephen Beecher.